living through a pandemic that has legitimately destroyed hundreds of thousands of lives. It has killed people, children whose dreams have faded away along with their lives. It has ravaged the economy, decreasing the incomes of people, the revenue of the government, stunting growth and development. It has led to people feeling isolated, left behind, lonely, with no community whatsoever. I might be wrong here, but I don't think anyone knows what I'm talking about. Not talking about COVID 19. I'm talking about the transnational disease of a lack of education. A lack of education due to a lack of state capacity and money and social norms, not just in India, but in the vast majority of the world, has meant that low income communities, girl children, LGBTQ children are left behind with their dreams and potential never actualized. Now, don't get me wrong here. Conditions have been improving every year. Enrollment in schools, for example, has been steadily increasing, with almost a 25% increase in girls' education in India in the past 2 decades. As countries get richer, they get more taxes, and they use those taxes to open up more schools, to pay teachers more, to improve facilities within schools, like building a sports playground or a science lab. And we were on an upward trajectory until something else happened. A little virus with its origins still unknown infiltrated countries and shut down schools. This time, I am talking about COVID 19. As cases are decreasing in most countries, as vaccinations are ramping up, we are truly in the process of reconstructing our society. Now, much of the discourse has been about healthcare systems and the economy when we talk about COVID 19, and deservedly so. But one area that has not really been part of discussions on social media, in newspapers, and TV channels is the impact of COVID 19 on learning outcomes and children's development. So, what happens when two pandemics, a lack of education and COVID 19, collide? I started thinking about this question ever since the pandemic started. My school shut down, and I was facing difficulties in understanding concepts, just adjusting to online learning. The important thing to note, though, is that I adjusted very quickly. I had school who made the transition incredibly smooth for me. I had 3 electronic devices at my disposal. I had a wonderful tutor who I could turn to anytime. I had access to the most comprehensive online tools of learning. If I don't understand a particular concept, I could go to a paid subscription website or a free website that will ensure that I do not fall behind in math. But I knew that everyone is not as privileged as I am. And so we really need to ask the question, what happens to the millions of students who are unfortunately born in communities where they don't have Wi-Fi connections or the money to get a 5,000 rupee smartphone, which has Zoom in it, when their family's monthly income is 1,500 rupees? What happens if you are born in countries and in specific areas within those countries where your states, your countries don't have the capacity to expand electrification projects to every corner of the country? So even if you have somehow the money to afford a Wi-Fi connection, you physically can't because there are no internet towers. The result is that you get left behind. 750,000 South African children have dropped out of school due to COVID 19 and are unlikely to return. That seems like a big, scary number. 750,000. That must be really bad. But it is so much more than just a number. It is 750,000 stories, 750,000 dreams that are never going to see the light of day. It is an 8-year-old kid who dreams of becoming a scientist, a 14-year-old who wants to use her education to fight global poverty. But apart from the individual, dropout rates affect us too, society at large, because we lose innovators, we lose doctors, we lose policymakers, we lose empathetic people who should be provided with the resources to change the world. And while we're on the subject of dropout rates, it is also important to ask who is likely to drop out. It is overwhelmingly likely to be girl children. Because think about this. If your family only has one electronic device, which can be used by one person at a time, Money that can only afford the education of one child now because you're unemployed as businesses have shut down due to COVID-19. Norms that dictate you to invest in a boy because he is succeed. A girl just needs to be married off anyway, and therefore it is not worth using our limited resources to invest in her. These norms, which we as a society have fought so hard to conquer in the past couple of decades, are returning, they're being perpetuated again, and harming girl children once again. Next generation of women trailblazers, especially during COVID-19, where family members are falling sick. The burden of taking care of ill family members falls on the girl child. This is why in India alone, around 10 million girls are at risk of dropping out and becoming susceptible to child marriage, to child labor, and in certain horrific instances, child trafficking. Schools, though, apart from providing an environment of learning and growth for children, also improve their health outcomes. Schemes like the midday meal scheme in India, which provides meals to all students in government and government aided schools, or community based school feeding programs carried out successfully on a large scale in Uganda, have improved nutrition levels in children and given an added incentive for families to send their children to school. All of that, regrettably, has gone away with school closures. But even if we talk about children who can attend schools, their learning is disrupted. It is disrupted by technical challenges while operating on Zoom or Google Meet. Problems that I'm sure so many of us, even with our fancy 4G connections, have faced. But apart from learning outcomes, it is a lack of community that is especially troubling. Schools shutting down has meant that students are not interacting with their school friends to a large extent, except for short conversations on social media, especially for children who do not have support structures apart from their families, who live in unstable and in certain terrible instances in abusive families. It is schools which provide a safe space and a community to fall back on. Now, I would admit something. All of this right now sounds pretty depressing. The good news, though, is that you and I can improve lives together. All of us in this room, whether you are a student, a parent, a teacher, or an observer, are relatively privileged. Most of us can devote an hour or two every week to volunteer at an organization teaching underprivileged children. I myself spent some time with students whose schools had shut down due to COVID-19, and I tutored them in mathematics. It was work. I just ensured that their basics were clear, designed some learning for them, and answered their doubts. That improved their conceptual understanding to a large extent so that when they go back to school, they are not completely blank. Even if you cannot volunteer, think about donating to charities that are doing meaningful work, who are designing cost-effective and successful interventions to improve learning outcomes during COVID-19. Offline volunteering, for a lot of us, I would admit, is still not possible. But we have innovative solutions. NGOs, local ones at that, conduct hands-on learning activities and educational content in India, for example, on a range of subjects. And that educational content is shared through a series of curated SMS and WhatsApp messages in 11 languages. So if you go on NGOs' websites, and if you know another language that they could potentially teach in, I think that that will be change enough. These are NGOs that are understaffed, underfunded, and they need our help. So if by investing your time and effort, you're able to improve even a single life, small amount, I think that that is change enough. As we are truly reconstructing our society, we are healing and we are gradually opening up schools. And a lot of us have the power to affect or speed up that decision. Because if you are an adult here, your vote makes a difference. If you are a student here, your activism makes a difference. Opening schools with the precautions required needs to be a priority going forward. At the end of the story, I would admit something. I might be a tad bit of a because I might not come to physical school tomorrow and instead choose online classes. But for the people who have no alternatives and are struggling, whose families would rather have them work on their family farm because schools have shut down, providing immediate help and reopening schools would be a life-changing decision. Thank you.